What's up guys, and welcome to this week's video. If you don't know me already, my name is Aaron Olson and it is my goal to drop a video each week to help you take the next step as a deer hunter. Today we're going to talk about how you can be in the right place at the right time more often and ultimately have more success in the deer woods. In order to consistently be successful in the deer woods, you need to be able to make calculated guesses about where a buck is going to be and when he's going to be there, so that way you can execute and go in for the kill. There are two commonalities between all super successful deer hunters. The first is that they understand deer patterns and how they progress as the season goes on. The deer season can be broken down into three parts: the early season, the rut phases, and the late season. The second commonality between all super successful deer hunters is they spend an enormous amount of time scouting. Because they scout so much, they have an intimate knowledge of the areas they're hunting, and because they have a thorough understanding of how the patterns change throughout the deer season, they're able to more efficiently utilize that scouting knowledge and put them in position to be in the right place at the right time come deer season. Today, I'm going to break down 3 hunts that illustrate where you should set up during the early season, where you should set up during the rut phases, and how you should hunt in the late season. And hopefully, it helps you be in the right place at the right time this fall. Okay, so let's first start by defining what the early season is. Without going too far down the rabbit hole, most Midwest states start around September 15th, and this early season period is going to last for the first few weeks, generally until about mid-October. During this time, deer are on a strict bedding to food movement pattern, which makes them extremely predictable and is a great time to target a mature buck. So our goal as deer hunters is to identify where that buck is bedding and what his preferred food sources is, so we can either intercept him going from bedding to food or from food to bedding. One of the challenges of hunting the early season is that oftentimes mature bucks will already be back in their bedding areas before first light. So the window to capitalize on this consistent movement is often reduced to just one time, and that's an evening hunt trying to intercept him from bedding to food. There are a lot of people that successfully shoot mature bucks in the morning, so if you want to fight me in the comments about that, go ahead. So one of the most common strategies during the early season is to hunt a destination food source, whether that's a crop field, a food plot, a stand of oaks, apple trees, any food source that's going to draw deer during daylight hours and present a shot opportunity for a hunter. The challenge with hunting destination food sources, especially in high pressured areas, unless that food source is directly adjacent to a bedding area, more times than not, that mature buck probably is not going to make it to the food source during legal shooting hours. So the other early season deer hunting strategy is to go in and set up as close to those buck beds as humanly possible without scaring him out of there, in hopes that while he travels the little bit of distance that he does during daylight hours, you're presented a shot opportunity. So now going back to the commonalities of all super successful deer hunters is they understand deer patterns, and 2, they scout a lot. So for this example, in the early season, how you identify these buck beds and find those buck beds a lot of times is through scouting. For those of you that don't know, a bedding area is essentially the area in which a deer spends the majority of his daylight hours. Usually, it's some type of thick cover that allows deer to use their eyes, ears, and nose to detect incoming predators. So the early season hunt that we're gonna break down took place on October 5th, 2019, where I found myself set up on the edge of a marsh bedding area, trying to intercept deer going from the bedding areas in the marsh to the cornfields to the north. The area I hunted that night, I had never physically scouted before. However, I did cyber scout on my onX Hunt app, and I estimated where I thought a buck might be bedding and where I could intercept him and capitalize on that bed to food movement pattern that's so prevalent during the early season. I arrived with plenty of time, and although I had an idea of where I wanted to ultimately end up, I took my time, I scouted my way in, looking for fresh sign. When I got to the edge of the marsh, there was several heavy trails leading from the marsh to the mainland where the cornfields were, and there was multiple fresh rubs. So I set up just on the inside of the marsh in hopes that I could overlook a huge area and at least get eyes on a target animal. A great way to capitalize during the early season is to do an observation hunt. Essentially a sit where you can overlook a large area, see a long ways, and get real-time intel of what these animals are doing, maybe get eyes on a target buck so that way you can make an adjustment in the next day or two and capitalize and move in for the kill. My setup was the best of both worlds. Not only did I have a great chance of intercepting a buck moving from his bed to the cornfields, but I could also overlook the entire marsh, see a long ways, and my goal was to at least identify a target buck so I could make the adjustments and be in the game in the coming days and get that buck killed. After I got set up, I patiently waited, and with about 45 minutes of daylight left, a nice 10-point stood up out of his bed and moved his way to the edge of the marsh where he was feeding on some natural browse and presented me a shot. As you can see in the video, there's initially a branch blocking my shot, so I dropped the tether of my saddle down about 18 inches so I can get a clean shot under the branch. I drew back, settled into my shot, and I squeezed and unfortunately hit the buck just a little bit far back. If you've seen the full video, I wait as long as I possibly can before the rain starts. We track and we track and we track, and we ultimately lost blood due to the rain. It downpoured all night long. I came back the next day in grid search for hours. I've went back multiple times in grid search since then with no luck. Although I personally doubt it, I'm praying that buck survived. Deer are incredibly resilient animals and survive some very severe injuries. Although it's an unfortunate ending to the story, it's a great illustration of how you can put yourself in the right place at the right time and capitalize on that prominent bedding to food pattern that's so consistent in the early season. Part number 2 of the deer season is the whitetail rut. It's a thing that so many people get excited about. It's what all of us deer hunters live for, that November time frame where the bucks are running crazy, and it's a great time to capitalize on a mature buck. There's a lot of strategies to increase your odds hunting during the rut. One of them is to hunt funnels. A funnel is exactly what it sounds like, anything that's gonna pinch down and concentrate deer activity so you can get a shot at one of those cruising bucks looking for a hot doe. Another common rut hunting strategy is to capitalize on doe movement and hunt destination food sources. If you're able to find the preferred food source come November in an area with a lot of does, I guarantee there's going to be bucks. A third and very effective rut hunting strategy is to set up downwind of doe bedding areas. The early season is all about getting tight on those buck bedding areas, but the rut is all about getting downwind of those doe bedding areas in hopes to catch a cruising buck, scent checking the area, looking for a hot doe. That's exactly what I did this year, October 26th. I came in early morning while the deer were still out in the crop fields, and I set up right downwind of a doe bedding area. As the morning went on, I actually had does come into the bedding area, lay down, and I was able to watch them for an extended amount of time. That was a super cool experience because not very often are you able to actually observe a bedded deer. Right about 10 o'clock, one of the does stood up and was acting kind of weird, and before I knew it, a nice buck was making his way through the bedding area, bumped those does out of their beds, smelled their beds to see if the does were in estrus. After scent checking the beds and deciding that those does were not in estrus, he made his way to me and I got a shot right about 20 yards. Some of the best times to hunt during the rut are from 10 o'clock in the morning to 2 o'clock in the afternoon because those bucks know that the does are bedding down, they know where the doe bedding areas are, and instead of chasing those does around while they're up on their feet, they're able to go scent check these areas while the does are laying down, find a receptive doe instead of expending way too much energy chasing them all day long. Remember, the goal is to be in the right place at the right time. Doesn't do you any good if you're in the right place at the wrong time. The right time during the rut might be right in the middle of the day when most hunters are not in the woods. It can be exhausting and a lot of work to hunt all day long from dark to dark. I'll make another video to talk about some of the tips that I use in order to have an effective all-day hunt that allows me to spend multiple days back to back to back all day long in my tree stand. The third and final stage of the hunting season is the late season. The late season is after the majority of the rut activity has subsided and generally is when it starts getting a lot colder out. During this time, deer are even more dependent on food sources. The natural browse is a little more limited. Bucks are depleted from chasing does nonstop for the last month, and the cold weather makes it critical for deer to be close to food sources. If you're able to hone in on a key food source in the late season, you're going to be in the game. The hunt that I'm going to show you is actually a rut hunt, but would have been a great late season setup. I was set up on the edge of a cut soybean field where there was a high concentration of deer numbers feeding each evening. Right at dusk, two bucks entered the field and made a beeline to right where I was sitting, and I was able to make a great shot on an old bully buck that we decided we were going to take out if we got an opportunity to, and he died before he even made it out of the field. Again, technically this was a rut hunt, but it's a great illustration of how you can set up in the late season to capitalize on that primary food source and get a crack at a buck. I hope you guys like these hunt breakdowns. I hope it helps you be more successful this fall. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, drop them in the comments below. I'll also link all 3 of these hunts in the description below if you want to check those out. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this helps you be in the right place at the right time this fall.